the listeners will want to know, cheeky question, but the listeners will want to know, so far, how much in funding have you been able to raise for Vault AI?
Total
Total.
over 15 million. I'll just leave it at that.
Key things that take most of that chunk, $15 million. Where does the money go to build the product?
I believe that if you work really hard and if you continuously try to essentially be better than you were yesterday, you will get noticed. And at that point, pick 10, 15, 20, 30 people that you would love to eventually be as, maybe not as successful as them, but try to get close to their success, right?
This is Egor, a former lead at Google who is the CEO and co-founder of Vault AI, an AI platform to help physical security and give real-time video intelligence to security teams. Today's episode was unlike anything we've had on the podcast so far. Egor talked us through his experience creating a startup and securing up to $15 million in funding for the startup. We also discussed how cloud computing is integrated into Vault AI's product using AWS, and also how Egor was able to climb to where he is today. This was a truly incredible episode. Please enjoy. So let's start off by just asking you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to the position you are today.
Oh, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me. I guess I started, unlike most tech founders that kind of have a journey starting from some really amazing schools and getting into tech. I actually started my adult life in the US military. And after doing that for a few years, I got out and went to school, got my degrees. And then I was lucky enough to be recruited by Google's research and development department called Google X. I had the privilege to spend 8 years at Google and then Alphabet, work on some really cool projects, meet some really cool people, very talented people. And back in 2018, I was still at Google. Unfortunately, we had a shooting that happened in San Bruno at one of our YouTube campuses. And because of my operational background and because my best friend is a very talented engineer that was living in the Bay Area at the time as well, working for some amazing companies, we kind of try to brainstorm if there's a way to apply technology to such violent and rapidly moving events as shootings. Could it be feasible? Can we do something about it? Can we use tech, AI, robotics in order not just to try and prevent it, because some things cannot be prevented, but maybe there's a way to do a better job at catching it very quickly and then giving that information to the people that do need to respond, be it security guards or law enforcement, in order to try and get there super fast to minimize the potential bad outcomes. And that was the initial idea behind Vault back in 2018. And here we are 6 years later with a working product and customers.
Amazing. Really cool. And I love the inspiration behind the product. And so for our audience, I've had a look through your website and seen some of the demos of Vault, but I just want to understand from you, can you break down exactly what Vault is and what it does?
So let's start from the basics. Vault is software, right? It is software that uses your existing cameras that are deployed in your organization. And we began focusing more and more in the education space, K through 12, public and private, as well as higher ed, like colleges and universities. But essentially, we plug into every single camera and think of it as all of those eyes, they belong to one brain, and the brain is Vault. And what Vault does is it continuously monitors for certain safety and security events. And it could be things like people down, like people slipping and falling and hitting their head on something and not moving. It could be fights. It could be loitering, vandalism, unauthorized access, all the way and including weapons like long guns, pistols, stabbing weapons, etc. So when something like that is detected, because the system operates in real time, it immediately identifies the problem and it sends that real-time intelligence. Think of it in three types of things that we send primarily. And that's the video evidence, the still imagery evidence, as well as the geolocation, meaning the coordinates of the event. So everything that a person that needs to respond or needs to manage that incident needs to know to be effective at their job. But also, what really separates us from many other smart systems designed to enhance physical security products and physical security operations at multiple places is that front and center of what we try to do is really utilize the geolocation component, meaning that if something is detected, a problem, and then that problem begins moving through your indoor spaces or outdoor spaces. A person was detected in a lobby and all of a sudden they're going through the stairwell to the next floor or the next building. Our system can track that across all your cameras automatically without the user having to press any buttons. So essentially, what previously took, 2, 3, 4, 5 people to do, between identifying the problem, communicating to other people, figuring out where the problem currently is, if it's dynamic, Vault can do this in real time, completely on its own. So essentially, it sends all the real-time intelligence to people that need to manage the incident, as well as respond to the incident fully automatically.
Really cool, and an amazing product. And it sounds like it is something that would sort of send the right alerts or what exactly is happening to sort of a SOC team or some sort of response team that would then, have the intel on what's happening before it would actually happen. As you said, it could detect weapons, it can detect um, sort of an intruder or that sort of thing. Is that sort of the aim?
Of course, the aim was let's try and prevent bad things from happening.
Hmm.
But as anybody who's ever been in this space, and by this space I mean, think military operations, think enterprise security operations, think law enforcement, some events cannot be prevented. That's just the
Right.
reality. They will happen. So the best thing that you can do is try to catch it as early as possible, as quickly as possible, and have as much critical information as you can get within a very short amount of time to be able to make the right decisions very quickly. Because the right decisions very quickly can be the difference between somebody losing their lives and somebody not losing their lives. It can be the difference between somebody getting legitimately hurt or just getting a few scratches. And that's what the actual aim is with our system. Once we started really digging into the subject, understanding that, hey, listen, problems are going to happen on a daily basis, right? If you look at something as violent as a shooting, it's a very high impact but a very low probability event. So chances are it's not going to happen to you.
Yeah.
But on a daily basis, there's a lot of safety incidents that organizations deal with that if you prevent them, not only are you going to make the life of your staff or your students much, much better, but also it's going to make your team feel a lot more effective because on a daily basis, they're seeing things that they have prevented that they responded to a lot better than they did previously, right? Previous month, previous quarter. And by us focusing not on how many things can we detect, because there's a lot of great systems out there that have amazing analytics, and they can detect 200, 300, 400 different things: cups, chairs, tables, whatever the case may be. We wanted to take a different approach. We really wanted to focus on things that on events that have the potential of causing damage either to people or to critical company assets or university assets. And we really started looking at things like actions, right? If you can
Hmm.
identify people versus not people, that's a very good thing. But if you can identify when somebody is doing something they're not supposed to be doing, if you can identify if they're in a place they're not supposed to be, right? If you can identify the difference between somebody doing yoga versus somebody lying on the ground and not moving because they hit their head on a ledge, God forbid, all of a sudden the events that you're flagging and that information that you're giving to the people that need to respond becomes critical because it does deal with the health and safety of individuals.
Amazing. Really interesting. And there's two things that we kind of want to dive into on this episode. One is what it takes to start something like this and to build a company and even be a CEO and co-founder. And another one is what it takes to engineer a product like this. So we'll start with the first. And I just wanted to ask you what it took to start Vault, get people behind this product, and even secure investment for Vault.
You have to be a little bit crazy to do that. And I don't mean this in a satirical way, by no means. Um, I was very fortunate to have worked directly for some amazing entrepreneurs while I was at Google. Many of them became my friends, many of them became my angel investors. And it was such an inspiring journey when I would work for them. And, they've sold multiple companies, they've had successful exits.
Mm,
Their exits were including to Google, which is why a lot of them actually ended up working for Google,
right.
right? And once I got interested in that topic of startups and how does that entire um, journey take somebody from just an idea to building a company and then eventually to successful exit, um, it seemed like there was a theme, meaning that listen, don't overthink it, don't wait for the perfect moment. If you have an idea, right, surround yourself by people that have done it before, and try to kill that idea on your own. And if you can, bring it to some of the potential advisors. And if there is potential for that idea, just begin, right?
Mm,
Because that journey of just trying to continuously de-risk your idea that then turns into a company, and continuously de-risk your company, that is the journey that will eventually lead you um, to build something really cool. Now, whether it'll be successful or not, nobody really knows. And that's another thing that they tell you. It's like, just understand that most startups fail. And like
mm,
embracing that failure and understanding that, hey, listen, most likely whatever I'm going to do, it's going to fail, right? Then, of course, saying no to the hobbies that you like, saying no to the amount of time you spend at the gym, for example, saying no to a stable salary and to benefits, saying no to many things in your personal life and making very tough choices in certain cases. And this is why I said that you have to be a little bit crazy. But um, seeing people that have done it at least once, uh, they don't seem like they want to go back to anything else. It's like
mm.
it's such a, I wouldn't call it a rush, but I would definitely call it, once you learn how to build something, create your own dreams, that take something that's in your head and actually put it out there. It does. It's very difficult to go back to working for some company, even though you're making great salary with a great title and like optimizing the color red of a logo, right? It just seems so unimportant and so boring that it's like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
So I guess that's what it takes to start something like that. You have to
Wow.
understand that most likely you will fail, but you have to believe that you won't. And you have to be ready to make a lot of sacrifices, work like crazy, and understand that on a daily basis you're going to have 1,000 ups and 1,000 downs, and it's going to drive you insane, but you just have to keep going.
And when it comes to making that jump from, like you said, the comfortable salary or, you know, whatever you're earning or the stable life to more of the high risk,
Hmm.
what does it take to make that jump? And also, how do you actually find and surround yourself with the people that can educate you or even mentor you in that journey?
um, let's start with the last one, I think, because that typically that's how the journey takes. You find those people and then you take the jump. um, Again, it's, I consider myself very lucky because I ended up at Google, and a lot of people at Google, specifically in the department that I worked for the first like 5 years of me being at Google, a lot of them are successful entrepreneurs. Now, just because they're around you doesn't mean that they're gonna come up to you and start, dragging you by the sleeve and saying, "Hey, Igor, let me teach you everything that I know." Of course not. I mean, these are very successful, very busy people with their own lives, and there's 1,000 people that want to just get a glimpse of what's in their head in order to learn. You have to prove yourself. They have to see something in you that's worth mentoring. And I don't
Mm.
know what that is. People are different. Maybe it's hard work. Maybe it's some um, some amazing thing that is in your head, some amazing brain capacity that you have. Maybe it's your, I don't know, the way you interact with people, your soft skills. But I believe that if you work really hard and if you continuously try to essentially be better than you were yesterday, you will get noticed. And at that point, pick 10, 15, 20, 30 people that you would love to eventually be as, maybe not as successful as them, but try to get close to their success, right? And just, if you know them personally, if they're around you, hey, Mike, my name is Igor. Listen, you don't know me, but I'm just really inspired and I admire all your successes. I was wondering if you could, mentor me half an hour every 3 months or so. Like, and I'm willing, to prove it to you that, I deserve it. I'm not going to let you down. I don't know. This just came from my head. You don't know them? Send them an email, send them a ping, send them a LinkedIn message. And yeah, like most of them will probably ignore you. But all you need is one,
Yeah.
because you need that. It's like the first customer. All you need is one. The first investor, all you need is one. Because you get one, it teaches you something, right? And also it gives you more confidence. And also, if you prove yourself to that one that you're actually taking this seriously, guess what? They know a lot of successful other people. They will introduce you. Next thing you know, you have two. Next thing you know, you have four. And that's how you start building that network. And uh, I always try to tell people, never go with the mentality that I want to get something out of those people. That's a terrible mentality, and those
Mm.
people will see right through you.
Yeah.
Always go with the mentality of, I want to learn, right?
Mm.
I just want to learn. You're successful. You're 1,000 times more successful than I am. Just teach me something, whatever. Teach me how to book a meeting, right? But it's invaluable lessons. Um, and once you have that, great. How do you take that? How do you take that plunge? I again consider myself lucky. I've been jumping out of airplanes for a very long time. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I love parachuting. And believe me, there is a thought process to what I'm telling you. So just bear with me for a few seconds. But to this day, every time I jump, because once the door opens, the green light goes in, and if you're the first one out, you're supposed to kind of spot to make sure that you're over the right, area. There's no airplanes or other things around, and kind of before you actually take the plunge. But right before I take the plunge, every single time, I really force a big smile, and I'm wearing a full face helmet. All right, and I say, hey, listen, death is inevitable. Just accept it, and I take the plunge, right? Because I realize that gravity is not going away. I will hit the ground one way or another, and it's the speed that is going to dictate whether I survive or not.
Mm.
Same thing here. I've talked I've talked to a lot of people. I've read every possible book that I could, everything from investing to how to run startups and all that stuff. But eventually, it came to a point where, okay, great, I have all the theory, I have none of the practice. Will it work? I have no idea. What my life will look like for the next 10 years, I have no idea. But I'm just going to have to do it. And by doing that, uh, some people are going to love you for it. Some people are going to hate you for it. Some
Yeah.
people are going to think that, you're doing the wrong thing because you're leaving. Other people are going to tell you, this is insane. What if it doesn't work, right? If you wait a couple of more years, you can become a VP or an SVP or something. So there's going to be a ton of conflicting information. And I think that's another challenge where it's just like, how bad do you want it? Like, do you want to, are you okay with trying and failing, or are
Mm.
you so afraid of failure that if you don't try it, you're not going to sit back 20 years from now saying, I should have done that? Like, what's going to bother you more, the missed opportunity or the potential failure?
I love that.
And by the way, I can't speak for everybody else. I'm just going to tell you what went through my head.
Yeah.
And that's where the skydiving thing came in. It's like, you know what? I just got to take the plunge and believe that everything is going to work out.
I love what you said there, and I can actually really relate. So recently, I quit my job. I was working at one of the second largest The second largest bank in the UK. Had a great job there. My salary was going up at a good rate every year. And I made the decision to leave and focus on this, right? Interviewing people, doing what I'm doing right now, getting amazing guests like yourself onto the podcast, sharing that and just growing a channel and a tech community of people. Um, and it's been a journey and I'm still on that journey. I'm actually returning to work. I've been out for 6 months. I'm returning in the next week. And what does that really say for me? Does it say that I've made a mistake and I failed? Or does it say that I took the jump of having this amazing experience, having this time to pursue a passion, and now I'm going back to working, but I know that long term, that's what I want to be doing.
Well,
And
well,
so,
well.
sorry, go ahead.
Can we flip the roles around? Can I interview you now
Absolutely.
for about 30
Yeah, yeah,
seconds?
yeah, of course.
Uh, all right, question.
Yeah.
Are you smarter or dumber now than you were 6 months ago?
Business wise,
It doesn't matter
and
which wise. Like, do you have more experience or less experience than you had 6 months ago?
I have so much more experience
You just answered your
in
own question.
loads of areas. But yeah, no. So true.
And you took the
So true.
plunge, which means that you know it's not that scary. Most
Yeah.
things in this life, as you know, it can be reversed. There's very few things that are irreversible. All
Mm,
right, you want to go back and get a job and just kind of do that thing, sure. But look what you've done, right? Like you did that by taking that
yeah.
plunge. And if you never would have, maybe you could have gotten this job, right? But you wouldn't have had this experience. So
Exactly.
I'm a terrible interviewer, by the way. But I just wanted to make the argument that you did the right thing.
Yes. And I really appreciate that. And honestly, when I look back, I really appreciate, what's happened in the past 6 months. I've learned a lot. And it's not the end. This podcast is still going. And recently it's been growing quite rapidly. And we're going to keep that going. We have some big news. It's been a long time coming, but the tech certified community is finally live on Discord. This is a space where tech professionals and aspiring tech professionals have come together. Imagine a space where you can ask questions, share ideas, and learn something new every day from different people. The community is growing fast. There's so much collaborative learning going on. We're having weekly video calls. And the best part about this community is that it is completely free. So what are you waiting for? The link is in the description of this video. Go and join the tech certified community. Let's get right back to the podcast. And so, Igor, just looking through your LinkedIn, risk lead, R&D lead, ops lead, you've been a lead in loads of different areas and working at Google. You've worked in the military. Well, you've been a part of the military, and you know even within your experience, how much did you learn about sort of AI to, and of course security, to then go ahead into a startup that had both of those things involved, and create a product that is AI and security focused?
Virtually nothing, and I'm
Mm,
not joking. Um, I will. There's two advisors and investors, and I'm lucky enough to call them my friends. Two people, Mike and Adrian, that I worked for at various times when I was at Google. I've learned so many things from them. I will forever be grateful to them. But one of the biggest things that I learned from them is that nothing is really like nothing is unachievable. You don't need to be a specialist, like the best of the best in a particular subject to be successful. You need to surround yourself by people that actually know what they're doing, right?
mm,
You just need to understand, some things of the critical areas to be able to effectively run the team or manage the team, right? Or be the driving force behind, uh, be the captain that is constantly focused on the North Star. That's also something that I stole from one of my other bosses while I was at Google. Um, So doing all of that, artificial intelligence, the first time I really started understanding what it can do is when I was working on Project Loon, which is the high altitude ballooning project. I was lucky enough to be one of the founding members of that project back in 20 end of 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
Uh, we had to figure out how to steer this giant constellation of balloons, and the only way to do it was essentially like we had to figure out an AI model that would take in consideration the direction of winds, the different altitudes, the time in the air, the how much gases you have in every single system, you know, to what altitudes to move every single balloon to keep them afloat as much as possible over a particular area or a set of particular areas. So you can imagine there's some super, super, super smart people that were doing that, and I couldn't even spell most of the stuff that they were doing, right? But just looking at it, then I understood the power of this technology. Like you can take all those complexities, and if you have the right people, you can automate it, and it just becomes this beautiful technological dance that the system does in itself, right? That was about AI. Security, I mean, I had military experience, sure. I had operational experience. I had deployment experience in the Middle East with the military, but I never had corporate security experience. That was something new.
Mm. Yeah.
What I did understand about corporate security is that there's a lot of moving pieces, but in order to be very successful at it, uh, most people in the company that are not associated with safety security should never see. Like it should just like they should be safe and secure without ever noticing you, right? If you can pull that off, so it doesn't feel like a highly secure, government building or a prison or whatever the case may be. If you can do that, then you're on the right track. So when we decided to start this, the reason that I brought up my best friend in the beginning, um, I've known him for what 25 years at this point. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's a lot smarter than me, that's for sure. He
Mm.
loves engineering. He loves being an engineering manager. He has amazing business sense, right? So when I was thinking, who could I pick, right, to be my counterpart to build this tech, I couldn't identify a better person. Because on a personal level, I knew that doesn't matter what comes our way, we'll be able to solve it. Even if we have to fight each other, we'll be able to solve it. We'll never shut down, right?
Mm.
And on an engineering level, I knew that not only will he be able to build it, but once he gets to a point, he understands that, okay, cool, this is my max, we need to get some specialists in. He's smart enough to figure that out before it starts to hurt us, to get the right people, to hire the right people, to get the right advisors, to start digging into a subject. And most importantly, he's so flexible that we knew that from the idea that we had to the product, even the prototype, and then eventually the product that gets deployed to customers, chances are it's going to be so drastically different that we wouldn't even be able to recognize it. And
Mm.
he's a generalist enough and flexible enough to be able to adjust everything that he knows in order to continue building and to continue providing value to our customers, right? So that was his pick. And in terms of security, okay, cool. I knew operations, but again, I was lucky enough to be connected to some great people, and one of them actually has been a strategic advisor for us for a very long time. He was directly involved in that incident at YouTube back in 2018 that kind of
Right.
started everything moving in my head.
Yeah.
And I called him up, and I called up a couple other folks that I knew and respected for a very long time that I, crossed paths with when I was at Google, and said, hey, guys, like you've been doing this for 20, 30 years, you know this with your eyes closed. Do you mind, being my advisors, right? Our advisors as a company. Because just because we think that this product is super cool and super useful, right? You as an industry expert can look at it and say, oh, great gadget, completely useless. And by the way, that's another thing that people should probably know that once you go to fundraise and once you try to get your first customers, people are going to call you baby ugly 100 times a day. You just
Mm.
have to kind of close your eyes on it, keep believing that it's beautiful, and keep believing that eventually you're going to get somebody that is going to see your baby the same way as you do.
Wow. And a question on that. How many investors did you pitch to before getting the funding that you wanted?
A lot,
Mm,
hundreds.
wow.
And again, lucky in that department. Connected to people that have raised money before, that know how to fundraise, that have sold companies. So their word matters. So when they introduce you, like that's the best way that you can get uh, investors is being introduced by investors that have previously invested in you, or if you're a first-time founder, being introduced by people those investors have invested in that became successful. Because in the pre-seed and seed stages, in a lot of cases, they're not really investing in the product; they're investing in you, in the team,
Mm,
knowing that everything is going to change, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And I was introduced by some really cool people that have a lot of weight in that community. And then once you have the first check, they introduce you to another investor and say, hey, I've invested in this company, you should probably take a look at them. And then again, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the funding. Absolutely not, right? Like many of them will pass on you for various reasons. Some don't believe it, others think it's too early, others just maybe they believe in the idea, but they don't believe that you are the right team that is going to dominate this market. Like there's so many different things. And for anybody who's interested, there's an amazing book, Secrets of Sand Hill Road. You can read it, you can listen to it on audiobooks. Like it's a super awesome book that I've listened to many times to kind of get an understanding of what the process end to end looks like.
Yeah.
But then you begin to pitch, and then everything from how the market is doing. Like we began to pitch 1 week before the lockdowns, the pandemic lockdowns. So the
Wow.
first week of March, we started pitching, right? And it wasn't until August of that year that we actually raised a round. So sure, we had to take a break because the world was kind of going crazy. We didn't understand what it was, but I think we pitched a good probably 30 investors before we got our first small check, very tiny check, and then we
Mm,
probably pitched another 30 to 50 investors before we actually got our first big check.
wow.
Um, and then the second round was a bigger round, same idea. We must have pitched, I don't know, probably about 100 investors all in all before we raised the round. Um, Third round, a little bit less, but then like you actually have customers, you actually have traction. The process becomes a little bit different, but still, just I guess the best way that I can put it is that it's going to be a lot longer than you expect, and it's going to be a lot more difficult than you expect.
Yeah.
So just get ready for it and understand that it's going to be a process. Dedicate at least 6 months for it. Be
Yeah.
prepared. Don't start building once, because some investors will talk to you and then they'll talk to you a month later and they want to see some progress what you've done. And if you're just like, you're exactly in the same spot as you were a month ago, they'll ask you, so what have you been doing for a month? Just pitching? Right? No, you're supposed to be running your company and pitch
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of really good, information about that on the Y Combinator website if anybody's interested.
So something that, well, the listeners will want to know, a cheeky question, but the listeners will want to know, so far, how much in funding have you been able to raise for Vault AI?
Um, Total
Total.
over 15 million. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. Wow. Over 15 million. And we don't have to go into details, but where do we end up sort of funneling these funds towards? What are the key things that take most of that chunk, $15 million? Where does the money go to build the product?
People's salaries. Like different companies are different, right? Um, but when you're building a piece of technology, you need people to build it. Very simple. You can, and I guess there's different schools of thought on that. But like, do you want to be a product-driven organization? Do you want to be a marketing-driven organization? Do you want to be a sales-driven organization? I don't know. I always thought that a great product sells itself, right? So
Mm,
if you hire the right people that actually know what they're doing, and if you build something truly unique and truly useful, meaning that it solves a critical enough problem. Like, let's take a pain scale. Like when you go to the doctor and they ask you, how much pain are you in? Is it like a 3, or is it like a 10 that you're about to die, right? So if
Mm.
you solve like a 8, 9, 10 problem for the customer, they will buy it themselves, right? Now, most likely the product, not everybody's so likely to immediately, the MVP is being developed and you're immediately at the 8, 9, 10 level. Like, in a lot of cases, it's a journey. You build something that you're really passionate about, you realize it doesn't really hit the right boxes, and you kind of try to adjust by listening more to your customers, by doing maybe some free deployments, some free pilots. And again, that's a journey. Figuring out your market. Maybe it's critical pain and education, but it's not critical pain and enterprise, or vice versa. And guess what you need for all of that? You need super talented engineers. And
Yeah.
super talented engineers cost a lot of money because they know
Mm.
that they're super talented, and a lot of companies will want them. And by the way, you will not be able to compete with the salaries that Apple, Google, Facebook, and Tesla and everybody else pays because you're a startup.
Yeah.
Meaning that you kind of have to balance out the super awesome people, but also people that maybe value the mission or their freedom or smaller working environments or a particular location more than they value a big salary package, right? So
Yeah.
that's also a journey to try and find those people and kind of convince them. In a lot of cases, you have to convince them why they should join your startup, because that stock that everybody said, well, we're going to give you a lot of stock. Well, yeah, but if the company fails, the stock is worth zero, right? So it has to be more than stock. It has to be, they have to be passionate what they're building, passionate enough to say no to a larger salary and to work specifically with your team, right? Because they really believe in you, they believe in your team, they believe in the product and the mission, whatever the case may be. So a
Right.
huge chunk of that money goes into paying people. And then, of course, as you progress, you may want to, probably at first you're not going to offer insurance, but then you want to offer insurance to people, medical, dental, vision, and then maybe
Of
a
course.
401k plan, or as you mature, right? Um, and then once you get to that point, you will eventually need some folks to take care of the finances, and you'll have folks to take care of accounting. Marketing is a big one that God, it's so exciting and so difficult. I still don't understand it. But if you get somebody who does it right, it's just amazing, right? And
Yeah.
we're lucky enough to have a really good person for that. But it is unbelievably expensive.
Mm.
Everything marketing does, right? Even if they try to be super, super frugal, it is, events are expensive. Getting in touch with the right people are expensive. Marketing materials, building the right deck is expensive, right?
Yep.
Sites and videos. So I think if I had to really break everything down, it's a most of it at this stage went to people, primarily engineering, and then the second biggest bucket was sales and marketing.
Wow. Wow. Really interesting to really like see that amount of money and understand what it really goes into to make
Mm.
a startup go forward and you know go towards that mission. Now, an important question, especially for our listeners, is what sort of cloud technology is integrated with this product? How much is there, cloud hosting that is integrated to the product? And if so, how much and how does that work?
So of course there is, and actually my co-founder, he worked for AWS for a very long time, so we do use AWS.
Wow.
And the way our deployments work is that we can do either an on-prem deployment using servers, or we can do a cloud deployment that essentially it goes directly to AWS, and all the processing and all our models kind of reside there. Now, the reality is the following, that most our customers will have and do have some sort of a hybrid architecture, because cloud will only work if their networks are amazing. But if you have spotty networks, you know, low upload speeds, and in some cases you can't really upgrade it due to costs or whatever, right?
Hmm.
An on-prem solution works much better, where most of the processing happens at the edge, but then just the large models live in AWS. But then if you have amazing infrastructure, you can go directly to cloud. And there's pros and cons to each, as you can imagine. But I really don't see a version of our product that is not connected somehow to the cloud. I wouldn't even understand how to build one. I'm sure Dimitri could, because like I said, he's the genius behind the entire architecture.
Yeah.
But even the on-prem solutions, we're still connected to AWS and the large models and the retraining and everything that we push to continuously update and upgrade our system, goes through AWS.
Amazing. It's good to know, and especially for our listeners who are very big on cloud technology. There are loads of AWS engineers that want to watch this podcast and that sort of thing. They'd be really interested in happy to understand that it's really integrated into a lot of what pretty much everyone does. But even at a startup of your caliber, AWS is being used to even integrate integrated with your product and with hosting of the product as well. Now,
Absolutely.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said that we're grateful to them, and we started using AWS essentially from the beginning because my co-founder he knows it very well because he worked for them, right? And the more we grow, the more our relationship grows. So we're very grateful to them.
Amazing. Now, Egor, this is sort of the section of the podcast which I enjoy most. And this section is really about an interesting career story. And these stories are either interesting in a really good way or interesting in a really bad way. So we've had people come onto this podcast and tell a story about, how sometimes a lot of the times as engineers, they come on and say how they made a mistake and something completely crashed and they shut down a system, they caused an outage, whatever happened, whatever mistake they made in their career. Other times they've told an amazing story. Some cybersecurity engineers have come on and even told stories about how they've saved the day in one way or another. And I wanted to ask you to give us your most interesting career or career story or story as a CEO that you'd want to share with the audience, whether it's good or a bad story.
Does it have to be as a CEO, or can I just pick, something that happened in my career from the beginning?
Anything in your whole career.
I always go back to my first true international mission at Google. And when Project Loon, it wasn't even called Project Loon at that point, it was called Daedalus or Icarus, I forgot, because it was called both at different times. But the leads of Project Loon decided that the launch of Project Loon to the world should happen outside of the US. And there were talks between Australia or New Zealand, and eventually we decided that it's going to be New Zealand. This was back in 2013. But somebody needed to go and essentially lay the entire groundwork. And there was a lot of stuff to be done there. Everything from securing airfields, because you're so dependent on the weather and the winds that we only had like one chance to do this right so it doesn't leak. So we had to, the logistical nightmares of it were crazy, right? And everybody's kind of thinking, well, how do you do that? How do you do that? And I really looked at that as like my chance to shine, right? My chance to separate myself from the crowd, as they say, and kind of show, hey, listen, you can pretty much give me an impossible task and I will accomplish it. I don't know how, but I will pull it off. I had the right military background for it. I believe I had the right education for it, right? So I said, what the hell? I'm just going to, float it out there. If they shut it down, they shut it down. And I remember having lunch at the X building. I forgot which one at that point. And I kind of pitched it to them, to the folks, the senior engineers and actually the two leads of the project. And they're like, you know what? We think you're the perfect person for it. Present your plan and we're gonna do it. I was a bit stumped. I was like, well, that is exactly what I did not expect. I expected some excuses. So within a week or so, I built a very quick plan. It's like, hey, I'm going to fly in here. I'm going to like get a local through some of my connections, and I'm going to get a Land Cruiser, and then I'm going to spend essentially 4 weeks, getting everything from like a warehouse to the right supplies to. I had a map of like 20 something airfields that I was going to go and like essentially build agreements with them that at any given moment I may or may not use your airfield, but I can tell you what it was for.
Mm.
Nobody knew that very few people and very strict confidentiality clauses knew that I was Google. That didn't know what we were going to do. But most other people that I would talk to didn't even know that we were Google.
Wow.
I essentially, I would say things like, hey, we're looking for some places where, we'll have like skydivers and we need to land some helicopters. So that there was just like I never lied, right? But I couldn't really tell him who I was, and I couldn't really tell him what this was for. So I had to come up with a version that makes sense. That we did land helicopters, and so everything was true. They just didn't know what was going to happen because I was tasked with make sure this doesn't leak.
Mm.
So from like March of 2013 all the way to I believe June or July, I forgot when we launched it. I essentially was by myself in New Zealand. So I had to prep the entire operation in New Zealand by myself. And then 2 weeks before the launch, some folks from the operations team started to show up, and then some engineers started to show up. And eventually, the critical mass of the launch team, and when I say launch team, I mean the entire team for that particular launch showed up, and everything went perfectly. I mean, we had a
Amazing.
boat to recover the balloons from the ocean. We had a nice spot to launch it from. We had all the equipment. We had the relationships built. So everything worked amazingly. And I remember we had this party afterwards, and music was playing. We had this little like bar that we rented out, and everybody's having drinks and everybody's having food. And I'm standing there just like in a corner, completely exhausted from the past 4 months. I was on my own for the whole time, just having a drink and looking at everybody having a good time. Um, and then I see the main lead of the project who was there, and I kind of come up to him and I look at him. I was like, "Listen, this is all great. It's like, are you happy? Like, did did I do well, right?" And he looks at me like I was, clinically insane. He goes, like, "Are you kidding? We flew in here. We did all of this, right? And it worked perfectly from the first time." And I was like, "Dude, I don't know what you did, but you did phenomenally well, right?" And
Mm.
that to me, just the reason keep going back to it is that I could have given myself so many excuses why not to do it. I could have completely overwhelmed myself by thinking, well, if it fails, everybody's going to think that I'm a failure. Everything is You're going to be the one to blame. And yeah, that's right. Success or failure of that particular operation was completely on my shoulder. Right?
Mm.
Everything that I did was either going to be successful or not successful. But if you're willing to accept those responsibilities and if you're willing to accept those risks and you work really hard and you understand the luck is a big part of it, if it doesn't succeed, you know what? Stand up tall, man up to it, and say that I screwed up. This is on me. But you would have learned a lot. But if it
Mm.
does work, right, it pays off because nobody can ever take away stuff like that. People will people will forget what you did, last quarter in your perf reviews, whatever. But stuff like that, nobody will be able to forget. And most importantly, you won't be able to forget because you did something that very few people would even think about doing just because of all the
Mm.
variables that go into it. I guess that's my long way of saying that I think that was the critical moment in my career that I realized that whatever I set my mind to, even if it scares me, the more audacious, the better. I'm going to do it and I'm going to see how it goes.
Wow. Incredible story. Thanks so much for sharing that, Igor. And it's been an incredible episode. We've learned so much from what you've shared with us, and even learned a lot about the Vault AI, the product, and the amazing work you're doing over there with the startup. Um, Really, really great to have you on this episode. And at the end of each episode, we always give the guests just an opportunity, just shout out anything or anyone that you'd want to shout out. So you can go ahead and do that.
Shout out. not very good at all this stuff, but well, biggest shout out is, thank you, Google slash Alphabet, for allowing me the opportunity to work there for 8 years. It has taught me a lot, and it has allowed me to meet some cool people. And those cool people, you all know who you are. Don't think that I forgot. Think about you every single day. Very grateful to it. Um, Investors, of course, and advisors. Without you, none of this would have worked. And it could still fail 100,000 different ways, but you've supported us, especially in the bad times. So thank you for that. And lastly, to my team at Volt, because honestly, they do the difficult work, right? This is not difficult. They're right now sitting behind their workstation and actually making sure that the customer is happy and building the next version of the product. So it's one giant organism that allows me to come up, and hopefully not bore you to death over 50 minutes of some stories. So very grateful. Thank you for everybody who has participated in making this a reality.
Thanks so much, Igor. And to the audience, thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll see you next week.